welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, super cool. Jordan, good to have you.
Of course, dude. I'm so glad we're making it work. Yes, sir.
Yeah, dude, Gentry, you and I have kind of exchanged messages, I would say, a couple years now? Something like that,
yeah.
Yeah, I was like, hey, if you're ever in Southern California, come on the podcast. But now since we have this virtual, it makes it a lot easier. And so people know I follow Gentry on social media. So if you don't, we will put that up when we post videos and all that. We'll talk about it here, but please follow him because I love what he posts. A lot of political stuff, which we're going to talk about here. A lot of the things that the media won't put up, Gentry puts up, and I love it. It seems like you've actually garnered quite a following now with what you're kind of putting up, right?
Yeah, it's been really fun. I have been deleted more than a few times, I will tell you. So I'll
deleted? You mean your Instagram account deleted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What?
So this is my second Instagram account. I've had 3 TikToks. I've had 2 Twitter accounts back before Elon bought it. But I've had like 250,000 followers deleted, just like that, because I'm posting truth and they don't like it. So I've been deleted a few times for some of the trans stuff that I put up, COVID stuff. My biggest account was on TikTok. I had 120,000 followers, like 100,000 video was like the average. So just crushing it there, and then it's all gone. And I'll tell you guys something. I know people who have been deleted more than me, but so I'm not trying to like get this moniker of the most censored person online, right? But I'm pretty censored, and it's demoralizing when you have to start from zero. It is horrible because you build momentum, you build a following, you build a community in the comments. I mean, if you go look at the comments, they're all. I get some weird comments, like actually all the time now, because we're hitting 57,000 followers on Instagram now, which is great. But there's a community built. There's friendships that are built. It's this joke. Getting deleted is a bummer. I'm trying. It sucks. Like playing between these like lines. What? You're dying
Jordan,
over there?
Sorry, yeah, Gentry's going on a good one here. Jordan's losing.
I know, dude. I'm so sorry. I put a Zin in right before this conversation, and I just inhaled a little saliva. So,
oh, buddy,
keep going.
What you got? You got wintergreen or you got spearmint? What are you doing?
Yeah, we're in California where you can't choose your flavor, so it's chill is the only ones we can get over here technically.
Yeah. California did away with flavored Zin. This is the land of no fun, by the way. If you
well, it's selective fun, right? California is still, regardless of the politics, it's still one of the best places in the world. I don't know. I was just in Huntington Beach, I think in February or something like that.
Okay.
And that place is just amazing. Politics suck, but it's gorgeous.
I mean, it's one of the few places that don't really have seasons. And if you grew up out here, you are not good at traveling because, or at least for me personally, because like you go to other states or you go places where it actually is cold or snows, and I'm like, I'm out. You get that 1 or 2 days, and then you're like, people live in this, like functionally, and I don't know. I'm weak in that way. But yeah, the politics of this state are not. I'm not a big fan of it. It's like you can choose to have an abortion, but you can't pick a flavor of nicotine pouch. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like we're all over the place over here.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Now, Gentry, you were talking about like your following, and you made a good point, right? Community, which that's what social media is for, right? Community. Now it has gotten a little crazy online, especially. I remember you putting a post about your Twitter. I have a Twitter. I don't really have a great following on there. For some reason, I have a lot of people that follow me on Instagram. But, dude, Twitter is like the Wild West still. I mean, there is some crazy stuff getting posted on there, dude. Crazy stuff.
I think opening up free speech to a point is actually a really good thing, because it'll get regulated, not necessarily by the platforms or by the government, but just by the comments, really.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So there's always a supply and demand, right? In any industry. And with social media, it's attention. And if you get a whole bunch of these like leftist accounts or OnlyFans girls or, these terrorist people on Twitter, and then, people see that and you're like, oh, that's terrible, we have to regulate. I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think the way to combat speech, especially speech you don't like, is with more speech, not regulation. And
Yeah.
so with Elon buying X and opening it up, it's like, at least from the political perspective, conservatives are dominating that platform for a good reason, because we've been censored on every other platform. But that doesn't mean that, the left can't go dominate it, or some of these other pockets of social media can't dominate it too. So I feel like the more speech that's on the internet, the better it is. I'm not a free speech absolutist. I think that, there's definitely some people that can go ahead and incite violence, and I'm not for that at all.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out like where that line is for me. I'm not a regulator, so it doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
what I think. But I think some of the rhetoric that's been pushed from the left the last 8 years on mainstream platforms like CNN, ABC, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, I mean, you name it, that Trump is Hitler, I think really caused the assassination attempt last week. And I feel like, not last week, 3 weeks ago, sorry. So much has happened in the last 3 weeks. It feels like it's been 10 years,
So much.
especially in the political world.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a lot's gone down. I mean, dude, we could probably have a 4-hour podcast just on the past, I would say even week and a half. I mean, there's so much going on that's underreported, such as the petrodollar, Saudi Arabia going from that. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
You have to search to find information about
Yeah.
that. Like, that's how pocketed that stuff is. They're like, whoa. No, let's look more about this trans boxer beating up a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, that's important news. Here's the problem. It's all important, right? It's all important. But there's stuff that's going on in the background, kind of like you're saying, with the rest of the world transitioning from the dollar to BRICS, or another system, or even crypto. I'm a big fan of crypto, but everyday people don't necessarily realize the impact that that's going to have. I mean, one of the things that has made America so great is, after World War II, one of the things that we decided was that the U.S. dollar was going to be the world reserve currency. And that's brought in like a ton of prosperity to America and every country. And so we don't really know the implications of going from the U.S. dollar to BRICS or some of these other currencies.
Yeah. It's. I think like you said, it's a big deal, and no one's talking about it. I mean, I from what I've read, as far as like Saudi Arabia going from the petrodollar and everything, that's not like, that was kind of propping up our dollar for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
We're already in a pretty bad situation with inflation and everything that's going on, and interest rates. So it's like, ooh, boy, I wonder what this is going to do over the next couple years, or even shorter. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a balance of value. I mean, if we're using other things to propagate the U.S. dollar, which gives it its power worldwide, right? And we're taking, I know it's not all of it, but the petrodollar and our influence with oil distribution through the world, essentially, that does prop us up to a marginal, percentage there. So taking that away, or let's say non-negotiating to move forward with it, is really more of what's going on. And there's other influences around that, which, like you said, with BRICS and whatnot. I think that the banking is that they're trying to, like, hey, let's not bring this attention forward, because this is going to be impacting. It's like, look, depending on what presidency we get moving forward, whether we're going to keep outsourcing everything or do anything internally, right, with the Alaskan pipeline and doing drilling here for a lot of different things. If we don't get that, then the consumer is not going to get a break at the pump. That's never going to happen. And, I think that it's strategic in that to leave this off of the mainstream stuff. And then there are a lot of important things that, look, 3 weeks ago or less than 3 weeks ago, there was an assassination attempt of the, top candidate for the opposition side, right? And it's only been 3 weeks and I don't see that on TV anymore. Like it's like an after and obviously depending on what you're watching, but if you turn on the main, ABC, NBC, all that stuff, they're not even talking about that, and it's like, because that's the kind of time frame that we work in, I feel like now, and we've seen that like accelerated over the last few years, that if something crazy happens, which I would say that was one of the most historic crazy things that has happened in the United States since the attempt on Reagan, essentially, like we're not talking about that. So it doesn't surprise me ever when you hear like, oh, hey, we lost the contract with the petrodollar for Saudi Arabia, and everyone's like, anyway, but then 3 years from now, when gas is $7.50 or $8 or $9 a gallon, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, I can't even afford to drive to work, what happened? And it's like, because people aren't paying attention. So when you have individuals like yourself and you're posting these current events that maybe aren't being publicized in the mainstream, it is it is great, and hopefully people do subscribe to that and keep being informed. And I'm not saying like picking one side or the other. I think the point of it is that we've kind of lived in this society where all we read is headlines, and we take that for what it is. There's no diving into it. And like, because I remember Tim the other night when you sent me, you're like, dude, the petrodollar, and I was like, I thought that has been in the works for the last couple of months. Like they've been fighting it back and forth. And dude, I tried to find information on it. Now I didn't spend a long time because I was at home. My kids were, running around all crazy and that. But it's just an example of like, there are so many working things around us that would behoove ourselves to be knowledgeable. And it seems like everything right now is against getting that knowledge out there, unless you like, or more of I don't know what to say, an outlier, but like having that idea that doesn't just, hey, do what you're told kind of thing. It's basically keeping us in a box, and then for some reason everyone's surprised when we have these massive changes, and it's unfortunate, and there's so many examples of it. Look the assassination attempt on Trump. If you have been reading about that, you'll know in the last week there's a lot of things that have come out where you're like, lone gunman, didn't act alone. Was there multiple shooters? How many people are influenced on it? Like things that you would think that are a massive, important security issues. And we're kind of like, ooh, look, the Olympics. They made him swim in dirty water. Or, hey, this trans person. I keep bringing that up because that just happened, and it blows my mind that they're allowed that to occur. But anyway, sorry, I don't know where I was ranting with that. But
No, you're good.
a lot of stuff.
Well, I think
It's
it comes
good.
down to the importance again of like what you're doing, Gentry. Your platform, what you post, not being afraid to post, not worrying about. It seems to me like you're not worried about what people think, and I do like that you leave the comments. It seems like you leave the negative comments, right? People that are going to hate on you or say crazy stuff. Because that is really, you can kind of see like a melting pot on it. Look, when you put something up or other things that I think are interesting, the first thing I do is comments. What are people saying? What is going on? Who's going crazy? Who's actually thinking logically? And it blows my mind how some people, it seems like, don't think for themselves, don't want to do research, don't want to find out for themselves what's happening in our country, what's important, what's the lies that are being told. And that's why I think it's interesting where for you, when you, I guess, like, what year would you say your first social media, was it TikTok or Instagram? Was that during COVID that it got deleted?
Yeah, so I've had a couple deleted in 20 and 21. So here's something really funny. I actually accidentally went viral on Trump stuff. So
Okay.
I was living in Seattle at the time. That's where I'm from. I live in Charlotte now, Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was trying to so This is actually a funny story. So I had gotten an audition to go on The Bachelor. I had gotten one to go on Love Is Blind. So I was trying to go like the dating show route before
Okay.
COVID. And
All
so
right.
I was like a manager for influencers. I helped consult small business. So I knew social media a little bit. And then I accidentally went viral for a Trump video, and it was really lazy video. I was just like, I was watching all this stuff unfold with George Floyd and COVID, and I was like, COVID's stupid. I don't know why we're all freaking out about it. It's not that bad. I got it. It wasn't like it sucked, but I survived. And so I put up this video, and I was like, hey guys, I'm a Trump supporter in Seattle. Who's with me? And that thing ended up going viral. Thousands of hate comments, and then thousands of supportive comments too. And I started gaining a following and started posting more. I'd grown up conservative. I'd grown up Christian. I was homeschooled, grew up in the church. So
Yeah.
I'd always kind of known that I was conservative, but I didn't really know why. And then the last 4 years have really been like a deep dive into like politics, political science, theology, like the whole 9 yards, so that I can actually back up what I'm actually saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had several accounts deleted. I think I can go back on my screenshots and look. But yeah,
That's super interesting. So it's never really happened to me. I don't think it's happened to Jordan. So one night you go to bed, you have your social media, and then you wake up and you go to log in, and you can't log. Is it like you can't log in? There's nothing there.
yeah, essentially. So you'll be able to log in, and then there's this thing that pops up and says we've removed your account for XYZ stupid reason, and then you just can't get back in.
And that's it. You just gotta make a new one.
Yeah.
Oh, we lost Jordan.
Sorry.
Oh no, there you are. Are you guys getting feedback by any chance?
A little bit.
I don't know if that's
Is it from
you.
my?
Might be you, Jordan. Just it's all right. Might be because the speaker's probably too might be echoing or something like that.
It's okay.
I love the technical difficulties. Well, it's interesting, right? Because I grew up that way too, Gentry. I grew up in a very strict Christian home, and I tell everybody here I'm a prodigal son. I walked away from my faith for quite some time, and lived a very, very wild. And for me, it was just coming into a realization like, yo, there ain't nothing out there. Like this is crazy. Like my life is getting worse, and I don't want to do this anymore. Not only that, but it brought a lot of hope, right? And I had to learn that it wasn't about religion and doing these just wake up and we got to go to church on Wednesday night and Sunday morning. And so like once I realized it was a personal relationship, it just changed a lot of my life. But brought a lot more meaning into my decision making as well, and that also includes politics, right? What's going to align with what I believe and what I know my faith is and what the Bible says. And the Bible is probably one of the most controversial books out there, and people don't like it. Example: look at the opening of the 2024 Olympics. What the heck is going on? That was absolutely wild. I couldn't believe it. I was watching, and I remember thinking like, one thing I know the Bible does say is God will not be mocked. And that's a dangerous place to start playing around in. And it was really shocking to see that Last Supper table. He had that huge overweight woman who I guess is supposed to represent Jesus. I don't even know, but there's just a lot going on that was like, like everything is so blatant now. No one's trying to hide it, and then it's like it's acceptable. And then everyone has this argument, well, Jesus, when he was on earth, he hung out with sinners and this and that. I'm like, yeah, of course he did. But he didn't like condone what they were doing. He hung out with them to change them. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't judge anybody. I'm the last person here on this earth, Gentry, that should be judging anyone. And some of my good friends, I have family members who are lesbian and are gay, and they're some of my closest friends. But to push things on people like that, I always say, like, I don't care what you do. You can be transsexual. You can do whatever you want. But, like, how much do I got to play along? How much does my family have to play along and be forced into certain things? My wife is pregnant now. We're having a daughter. And there's certain things now in the schools that are being taught. And I'm like, in California, I'm like, we might have to put her in a private school. I don't agree with that. Like, why can't kids be kids? Why are we forcing sexuality on them at such a young age. We're taking away their innocence. Let them be who they're going to be. So to see what was happening in the Olympics, man, just blatantly in your face, and it's like everyone's like, whatever. It's a wild time to be alive right now.
Do you feel that like a lot of things that have, let's say, the last 6-7 years, a lot of things have become very important, that, or at least displayed as being very important, especially with like the LGBT trans community, like has kind of taken this forefront. Do you think that a little bit of that is maybe because like it's almost like a low hanging fruit item as far as politically? Because it's one of those things where you can like, hey, you should be able to do whatever you want. It's very easy to say, hey, we believe in freedom, you should be able to do what you want, right? So like most people that don't have vested interests or maybe aren't even a part of these communities, they can sit back and go, well, yeah, that's okay. And then once that kind of gets perpetuated into the, people running, like basically politicking, that's where you start to see like a little bit of this, like, I mean, because look, at the end of the day, I do think like as an adult, you should be able to do what you want to do as long as you're not harming anyone around you, and it's very simple, now I'm not saying, no, I'll stick by that actually. Like, but we're, obviously getting involved with the kids and the grooming and all this kind of stuff. I'm completely against all that, but what I found to be interesting is like not that long ago, trans, the more associative medical term would have been gender dysphoria, right? And there was like, hey, look, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, like, there should be help for people that are having issues with that. And somewhere along the lines, it went from that to it's, be yourself in that way and be beautiful and brave and all this kind of stuff, and how that parlayed into more and more stuff with kids. We got a little bit of a snapshot over the last few years of that movement, and it's like, not saying that there's certain aspects of stuff that aren't important, but like to me, I'm like, how did that even gain ground? Other than the only like feasible thing I could think of is that politicians and people at the top figured out how to segment feelings, and by that translates to being able to move money. And I think that that's where, it's like basically saying like, if you had to run as a, as a class president when you're in elementary school, and you're like, hey, if you vote for me, I'm going to put Yoo-hoo in all the water fountains. We don't have to drink water anymore. It sounds very simple. People are going to be like, hell yeah, I love Yoo-hoo. It's amazing. Not really looking at what I represent as a kid, not knowing anything else other than people like Yoo-hoo. And I feel like there's a lot of that, like obviously that's very basic, but the similarities in what becomes more important at the time that we've seen, especially with like the left, if you say, or any kind of progressive movement people, is that they find these things that are a little bit untouched and they exploit them. And they'll utilize that as like, look at me, I'm virtuous, I believe in everyone has a thing. And you're like, yeah, except you're part of making bills that have associated medical insurance coverages that now your donors are getting back end paid, for certain things that never existed before this time. And now all of a sudden it's a super important thing. And now it's affecting not just the individual. It's like, hey, if you want to tuck your sack back and throw some rouge on and paint the town red, cool, man. But I don't have to like be like, hey, I'm so proud of you. Nor do I think that, hey, my kid could potentially be influenced by this, right? So we kind of live in that, like, that's why like I always kind of come back to, what started it? Why was it that way? Why all of a sudden now more than ever in history, this is an important subject matter that people are even voting on, And I think it's because of that. I think it's because it's like a generalized low-hanging fruit issue. And I use that term as in it's easy to grab, right? And anyway,
So my thoughts on this is it's really easy to divide people, kind of like what you were suggesting, into like identity politics, right? So what the left has done really, really well is first they say, oh, this group is persecuted, right? And then they want us to tolerate. and then they want us to accept. And now they're forcing us to participate, right? So we've gone from persecute, tolerate, acceptance, right? Where now everyone's like, oh, like everyone's beautiful, everyone's all this kind of stuff. And that happens with the LGBTQ, IA plus Q to a, however many things there are that happen with really the fat phobia community, right? There's like all this like what's it called? Fat acceptance now, where we're just accepting the fact that you have eaten yourself into oblivion, and like it's horrible, it's awful. You need help. Like you're very sick. But now we're getting into the part of history where we have to participate, and that's where the Olympic Games ceremony comes in, where we're forced to watch it. And not only is it a representation of the trans agenda, but it's also like a slap in the face to all Christians. And it's insane. It's also happening in schools in California and in Washington, I think Chicago too. There's a ton of states now where like teachers somehow think they have authority to hide stuff from their parents. And it doesn't matter if it's on LGBTQ or insert whatever topic there. Like teachers don't, like the government doesn't have authority to hide stuff from parents, because in a way, in a very large way, they're taking control of the kids, and they're saying, oh, like your parents don't know anything, right? So we're the experts, so we're going to do this, and your parents may not get it, and all this kind of stuff. And kids are so impressionable. They're learning stuff as it comes. They don't, unless you have like a really smart kid and you just like instilled like discernment and wisdom, which is really hard to do, I think, because I didn't learn wisdom until I was like 28, and my parents are fantastic.
100%. 100%, dude. 100%.
Yeah, but like kids are like so impressionable and learning stuff like as it goes. And so like they're going to take most things as truth because someone older and taller and, you know, more powerful than them are telling them the truth. It's just ridiculous. And I kind of disagree with you, Jordan, a little bit on the, you know, live and let live, because with the LGBTQ plus community, they can't reproduce at all. And so in a lot of ways, and we're seeing this, and it's not covert right now, it's overt. They have to recruit, and it's like really, really disgusting. And that's just in like the last 7, 8, 9 years. If you go back to if you go back before then, and you talk to some people in the homosexual community, just gay, right, or lesbian. We're not going to add any of the other letters. There's a ton of stories about being groomed really, really young by older men, and you know, it's like live and let live. But then you're doing this. It's really strange. The whole LGBTQ plus community was built off of the idea of pedophilia.
Wow.
And there's a whole bunch of like sexual revolution stuff going back to the 50s and 60s.
No, and to make just to clarify, if the way I described that was more of a live and let live, I think it's on the parameters of not invoking potential issues to yourself and or your family, because I know what you're talking about, and I know that that's always a lot of the when you have like LGBT protection stuff, like especially there was, oh my gosh, I forgot. It was like an assembly meeting where they were talking about something with protection of the kids, but they had some activists from those groups that were opposing of it because of the past practice, is how they were stating it, of older men, like because their first experiences in a gay relationship was when they were younger, so they would have been essentially like under the age of 18, right? And then that's this like, you know, accepted practice to a certain extent within that community. Now I don't think that that's appropriate, because it doesn't work along any lines, and an adult is an adult and a kid is a kid, period, to me. So and I understand what you're saying, so I just wanted to clarify, I don't mean live and let live, like, yeah, you can go ahead and practice whatever you think is appropriate, because on the end of that, meaning if there's anything that involves children and or outside of your own personal space, I'm not for that either, because that's in
Yeah.
fact a lot of things that are problematic as far as like grooming standards and things like under
Yeah.
those issues. So no, and I hear what you're saying. And I wish I could remember what the assembly meeting was about, because the premise was talking about like public school safety and basically being able to talk to parents. And they had like activists saying like, oh, because it's either racist or it's gender biased or sexuality issues and all that stuff. And it's like, no, the principle is that the families should be informed of what their students are doing, regardless of their association. And I mean, I can get into how ridiculous I think when kids state things, but I don't want to drown out because I feel like that's talked about that a lot on the shows here. But and that's the hard part, right? Because there's like this constant line in the sand of like, if I say, oh, you can do whatever you want as long as you're saving yourself, that literally means you not impacting other people,
Yeah.
and that doesn't really follow in line with, I feel like, as far as what is being projected as the community standard when it comes to involvement with minors and stuff with the
Yeah.
LGBTQ stuff.
So my thought process on the live and let live is it's a little bit naive, because we would be ignoring the existence of evil, right? So evil doesn't stop itself, so it must be stopped. I think one of the reasons why we're in such a terrible spot as a nation is because a lot of people adopted the live and let live, right? So one of the, like, I get asked this all the time, like, oh, you're just spreading hate on social media, you're part of the problem, you're this, you're that. And I'm like, I'm actually part of the solution. Like, I don't think you understand that if I didn't enter the fight, and a lot of like the peers that I run with didn't enter the fight, social media would be rampant with this like woke leftist Marxist ideology, and it would go unchecked. It would totally go unchecked. And so like my entering into this battle on accident, but I've taken full responsibility for really mistakes that and problems that I didn't create, but I have to step up and do it, because we're just saying like live and let live. Like, oh, you go do you, I'm gonna do me. Like, voting doesn't matter because whatever, God's in control. And I think I don't know, I've got so many thoughts on that, on God's sovereignty versus our will. It's yeah.
I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot from a lot of boomers. It's like God's in control. I was like, yeah, but you can still make decisions. You can still vote, and I want to say the importance of voting, because I hear that a lot here in California with friends who are more right wing. Right? Well, why vote? It doesn't even matter. California is always going to be Democrat. I'm like, no, like you need to vote. You need to put your vote in. You need to go to the polling booths. I mean, I grew up in a military home. Why I'm so big on that is because I saw what my dad has been through and what his special forces teams went through and the men that he lost. And he was in Vietnam. I mean, he had a 22 plus career as a Green Beret, and the price of freedom and what this country was bought on and the blood that was shed so that we can be here and that people can worship Satan or be Christian or be atheist or be trans, be lesbian or gay. That all was fought so hard for people to have the right to live this way. So yes, you know what? Get out and vote. You need to vote. Your voice needs to be heard. You need to say what you believe in. And I think with the more people that start standing up, kind of like, you and others, and I would say even myself at times, of posting what we believe and who we're voting for, that has influence. I always say there's always those like closet hiders, the ones that kind of hide in the shadows. They're like, oh, I don't know, but they're going to vote, they're going to vote for Trump or whatever, It's like, don't be afraid to say who you're going to vote for, man. I mean, you have the right to say that,
So girls are posting their OnlyFans link shamelessly. Full-grown men aren't. They don't have the balls, the stones to post that they're voting for Trump. That's what's wrong with America right now, is that dudes are weak. They're like, oh, I don't want to, lose friends or even lose a job or whatever. The job one kind of makes sense, but also not really, because you could be the first and it could just start a whole wave of people going in that direction. Here's a perfect example. Nelk Boys, Kyle Forjar, the Full Send podcast, they had Trump on the Full Send podcast, I think a year ago or 2 years ago. And now Trump is going on Logan Paul's podcast. He's going on a ton of other stuff. Like there's so many celebrities and content creators, YouTubers that are standing up. And I don't think Full Send was necessarily like the first, but they were like a big part of that momentum shift. It was like, oh, actually, we can make it cool to support Trump. We can make it a thing now. And so, like, just be first. Just have some stones and go for it.
Yeah.
I think
I 100%.
Yeah, I think that it's a reflection of the time period that we're in. You know, I mean, I feel like yeah, growing some stones is a good way to put it. And you know, I think that the more excuse me, the more times people speak out, and like, you shouldn't, you know, and like, look, if you're afraid to like tell people that you work with or you're around, like, you have a conservative value system, like, that's the scary thing to let go, you know, like, that shouldn't be a problem. And honestly, like, and if you disagree, like, that's fine too, you know, but like, don't be afraid to do it. Don't get put in a box. Don't get told what to do. If you don't believe in it or you think it's wrong, like, stand up. And I agree with you. Like, and it's something that I feel it's like, you know, like, let's say post World War II, right? Everyone's like patriotic and, you know, all about work, you know, and I'm sure there's plenty of examples. I'm just giving a generalization of the time period. And I wasn't alive at that time, so I didn't get to experience that. But I feel like I grew up around a family that was very much that way. And like, doing your civic duty, standing up for what is right, you know, like, don't be afraid to, like, if something's wrong, call it for what it is, or try to intervene and stop it, right? That was kind of like the moral foundation I feel like I had. And I feel like as I've gotten older, you know, and like, and you know, even like saying, like, I'm not trying to backtrack what I was saying about, like, you know, you could do what you want to do, you know, I mean, I feel like to a certain extent that is part of the freedom in this country. But I also feel like we have civic duty, and we have to, you know, I don't know, like, as a man, like, I feel like I mean, shit, I dedicated my life's work to helping people. You know what I mean? So, like, at the end of the day, you know, whether that means politically I agree with you or disagree, like, that shouldn't be a problem if I see you do something or vice versa that's wrong, to stand up and say something, you know, and that goes across the board. And there's a bunch, you know, I just think, like, we're on that pendulum swift. You know the saying, it's like, hard times make strong men make good times create weak men. Like, I think we're in that good times, weak men scenario right now. And it doesn't mean that it can't get better. You know, I don't want to go full doom and gloom on everything, because it can just be something as simple as people standing up for what they believe in. You know, and if that moral foundation is like a foundation of family, God, and country, I don't think standing up in that way is problematic truly. You know, now people will say, like, oh, that's a, you know, triggering words. Well, you can call it what you want to call it. I think it's a fundamental moral foundation that's led us to be in one of the greatest countries that have ever existed. And I think that continuing that trend will only put us in a better position moving forward, even though it feels right now that we swayed a little bit, or a lot of it, depending on who you're asking.
I think it really started when everyone decided to be politically correct, but there was only a few of us that were actually politicians, so we didn't actually have to be politically correct. Like, we could have just said whatever we wanted, guys. We could have kept using the word retarded. We could have kept using the word fag. We could have done it all. Like, we weren't politicians back then. We could have done it. But going back to voting, so I'm from Washington State, which is one of the probably most depressing states politically. It's a gorgeous state. It's an outdoorman's dream, but the conservatives in that state, they have bought the lie that their vote doesn't matter, and so they don't vote. But I've looked at the numbers, and if and this is a pipe dream, so it's really hard to get 100% participation. But if 100% of people voted, it would be way closer than people thought.
Mm.
And I bet you that trend is the same in Oregon, California, New York, not Chicago, but Illinois. Some of these like really, really Colorado, I bet too. Some of these really, really blue states where if we got more of participation, it would be a lot closer than people thought. There was a video I saw recently that described what could happen if we got rid of the electoral college, and it wasn't necessarily that the U.S. would just go blue, because there's not more Democrats than there are Republicans. In fact, it's very even if you look at the registration. In fact, the growing number of people right now is independents. I think there's like 20 to 30% independents, depending on what stat you look at. And so, like the country's coming more towards the middle than you think. But if we did, and I'm not saying I want this, I'm saying it was kind of a fun exercise to think about. But if we did go to just a popular vote, that means everyone vote actually does matter.
Mm.
Right. And
Yeah.
so instead of just going to swing states, right, I think Trump in 2020, I think he went to Wisconsin like 20 times in a month in October. Like the guy was just like crushing. He's trying to win that state at all costs. But if like there was a chance to pick up a ton of votes in Seattle or LA or Chicago or whatever, he would go there, and every vote would matter. And I feel like there would be more of a turnout, because like right now, especially in California, Oregon, Washington, like the West Coast, like it makes sense why people would think that your vote doesn't matter, right? Like I understand the process. But then if you extrapolate that out to, tens or hundreds of thousands of people, and they all think that their vote doesn't matter, then it really doesn't matter. But if we can figure out how to switch that mindset of, I'm going to write on a piece of paper and submit it, it's not that hard, right? It's not like we're asking you to like engage in trench warfare or storm Normandy Beach or, go into freaking Baghdad and like go house to house. We're asking you to fill out a piece of paper, right? I feel like it's not that hard. And so people waste like 4 to 5 hours a day on Netflix. They can waste, an hour to go to the voting booth and go vote.
Yeah, I totally agree.
If we get a lot of participation, it could change the country. Here's a really good example. The Arizona primary just ended, and for primary votes for Senate, Kari Lake was running. She won the primary, but second place was Sheriff Lamb, and combined they got about 580,000 votes. On the Democratic side, they got 430 something thousand. And so just voter turnout for the primary showed greater numbers for Republicans than Democrats, which is amazing. There's a whole bunch of get out the vote initiatives that are happening. Turning Point Action has one. Send the Vote is another one too. Swamp the Vote. There's a ton of these out there. But the point is that if like these voter turnout initiatives actually work really well, and if we just kind of go based on the trends, Kari Lake is most likely going to win Arizona in November, which would be a huge win. If we picked up a seat in the House, that would be unbelievable. And that is actually happening all over the country, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Michigan. There's even stuff happening in Washington State that I know of, just because I'm from there. So I'm still tied to the comms. But your vote matters. And even if you're going to lose, fill out the piece of paper and go to the polls.
Yeah.
Mail it in, vote on day, vote early, absentee ballot, whatever it is. Just make sure you get it. The Democrats, and I'm sorry to make this like super political, but I'm just fired up. The Democrats' religion is voting, and they're doing their religion better than the right.
That's the best way I've ever heard that put, actually. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, I
And
mean,
it's
like, how do we reach this time period where you don't even have to show an ID to vote? I mean, you can't even buy a 6-pack of beer without showing your ID. You know, but you can help pass a ballot that changes everything.
You can't buy beer, alcohol. You can't buy Zins. You can't buy Zins without an ID. You can't get a job. You can't get an airplane. You can't do any of this stuff. Like but it's all racist, you guys. It's racist now to get a job, apparently.
Oh, that's right. My bad.
Ridiculous, dude. It's almost, it's when I sit back and try to, one thing we learn in working in the fire service, right, is when we go on scene to help people, whether it's a fire or a big car accident or something major going on, you have to try and look at things, especially when you're in a leadership position as, say, a company officer, which is a captain. You're over that fire engine, the crew, right? You're trying to look at it from like the 30,000 foot level, right? Instead of the 10-foot level where, you're just moth to flame fighting fire. You're trying to see everything that's going on around you. What's happening? What's the bigger picture? What's the potential for this incident to get worse? Right. And that's how I've started kind of looking at our country. I'm like, let me take a step back here and see what's going on. And when you open that lens, you kind of start looking, you're like, yo, is like bad good and good bad now? What? I'm kind of tripping here. Like, things have changed so much. But with that being said, it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong, Gentry, but it seems like there's kind of a shift coming. I'm mixed. I'm African American and white. My dad's white, mom's African American, and I will say that a lot of the family that I know and I talk to, they're African American, historically just voted Democrat because that's what you do. That's what we do as African American. You vote Democrat. And this is the first time I think I've ever heard them say, "I'm voting for Trump." There's like that. I was like, wait, what? What's happening here? Are you guys serious? Because before it was like, right? It's like you said, Trump is Hitler, all this crazy stuff. He's racist, and now there's just like it's almost like it's gotten a little bit so out of hand where people are like, hey, we need to reel this back in a little bit, just a little bit, And you're looking at his poll numbers when Sleepy Joe was still running for president. It's like, yo, this guy's. He's gonna win, dude. This is ridiculous, right? And then of course they forced Kamala on us, and now like I don't know, Gentry, you're very well versed in politics more than I am, but some of these polls that I'm seeing now that Harris is now coming up and pretty close to Trump, I'm like, how she didn't even get 1% of the vote when she was going for president? I mean, what's her famous saying? Unburden what has been. I think I saw like a 4-minute video of that same line spoken in the last 3 years over and over in every single speech. It's wild, dude.
So Kamala Harris is an enigma that I don't fully understand why she's so popular. I know that she is, and I can see the path, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, she was rated one of the worst vice presidents of all time. And now she's polling better than Trump. Like it doesn't make any sense. The other thing which is really interesting, hear me on this. When she says be unburdened by what has been, it sounds like word salad. It sounds like she's retarded, but it's actually a Marxist dog whistle, because what she's saying is that she doesn't want to be burdened by what has been America. And I'm not trying to come up with a conspiracy theory. I'm going off of what James Lindsay is saying. And I don't know if you guys follow James, but he's a fantastic follow on Twitter. One of the smartest people when it comes to like the whole Marxist movement. He's saying that that's like a Marxist dog whistle. And if you actually look at some of the stuff that she wants to do, like take away all guns, she wants to let everyone in the country and give them a citizenship, which is insane. She's essentially co-signed all of Joe Biden's policies, which is nuts. And it's all media hype. It's all skewed polls, to be honest. I even saw some of the data on some of the polls, and they polled, I think it was like 800 people on the left and 500 people on the right, and then like 300 people in the middle. And it was pretty even. as far as the results go. But like, if you poll more people on the left, you're going to get a skewed poll. Like if I go put on my Instagram, are you voting for Trump or Kamala? I'm going to get 100% for Trump, and I'm like, oh, look, it's all. So it like that stuff like doesn't matter. She's polling worse with some of the people who polled really well for Joe Biden, like the Black community and Hispanics and all this kind of stuff. And it's all skewed polls because they're not actually comparing it to 2020. They're just showing the polls and saying, "Oh, she's polling better than Trump on these things." It's like, yeah, but she's actually going downhill.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. She also has no plan for us, none at all.
No.
Like absolutely none. In fact, this is really interesting. Most people don't go to political websites to see what people are saying, right? They just like go listen to the interviews and stuff like that. Trump on his website has a lot of plans. I think if he gets a really good administration, he'll be able to execute a lot of it because that's what he did in his last administration. There was some stuff that he couldn't do because, Schumer and Nancy Pelosi were being butts. But on her website, there's no policies. It's donation links and job openings. That's it.
Yeah, but are you surprised though? No, I'm not surprised at that at all. Like, I feel like her slogan should be status quo.
Joe Biden had policies on his website. It was more of like Trump sucks. That's what his policy was, but it was still on his website.
It was like everything that's been done, we're just going to do the opposite. Joe Biden, 2020. Yeah.
Joe Biden, 2020.
It's so crazy, because I mean, like, and I don't know if you guys want to go into that, but like basically we just watched like a low grade coup take place and a absolutely undemocratic process of electing, and again, as the VP, like it is what it is, but like they didn't throw out any other candidates. Everyone called for Joe to step down, and then all of a sudden she's the one, and we can get into the conspiracy of all that, how he grew like 8 inches overnight after COVID and all that fun stuff. But it's the weirdest video ever. And I tried to like want to believe that it was perspective differences. I'm like, no, dude, he's like 6 inches taller than her and she's wearing heels and he has no gimp when he walks. That's not him. But anyway.
Jim Carrey, dude. They're saying it's Jim Carrey.
You never know. You never know. I look, at this point, I wouldn't be shocked. But, the whole thing with like her polling high and all that stuff, it's like the day she announced that she was going to do it, she got like $82 million, which they basically transfer the PAC funding over from Joe Biden's name to hers. But everything was, look at how much money she raised in less than 24 hours. It's like, come on, okay. Like at some point, this silliness has to just stop. But then it's like you're asking a question to a system that is already propagated by absolute silliness, in my opinion. So, I'm not surprised at it. I'm not surprised if she doesn't answer one question logically. I'm not surprised if there's no game plan other than what they'll probably do with the way things have been going over the last week and a half. I wouldn't be surprised if they put out something that said, we're just going to do everything opposite of the Project 2025 says. Because that seems to be such a hot button topic with, like, oh, they're going to do all this stuff, and which is not even what's endorsed by Trump or on his website as far as plans. So I'm not even giving credit to any of that, and they're like, well, 140 people that worked under the Trump administration may have been associated with the think tank, right, from Heritage Group. And it's like, yeah, but that's like saying that when the Green New Deal came out, everyone that worked on that was going to absolutely push everything on the Green New Deal. So it's like it's semantics of scare tactics, and that's pretty much all they have. They have that, and they have, look, we have this half and half female candidate, who all, in all honesty, it's like, look, whatever nationality she is, that's great, right? It's ironic that you never heard about her being black up until 4 years ago, but, ironic nonetheless, and as for like, Tim, you were talking about like with the African American community, there has been a lot of stuff that I've seen, like, just posts and things, just, like little instances of like, hey, we're talking about it, and it was kind of just like, it was interesting seeing the perspective of, even though maybe have been a lifelong Democrat, you're like, dude, I'm not voting for that lady. You know, not to mention like the same person who like got hyped up for incarcerating thousands of people on bullshit marijuana policy charges was also talking about smoking and listening to Dr. Dre and Tupac back in the day. You know what I mean? So it's like you have just like if hypocrite was a face, you have someone that falls in suit in that very well. And my hope is that the American people can see past that, you know, and it's going to come at people like you, Gentry, posting stuff up that the mainstream media is not going to post, and having the opportunity to like run shit in the comment section, which I love. I know you said that earlier, Tim. I love reading it because it's like, and I used to like, I wouldn't call myself a troll, but I used to like try to like ask questions that I thought were like, well, you're not answering. You're not. You know, you're making a blanket statement. How do you really feel about it? I'm trying to be creative in that way, and obviously, you run into people that just are like, "Well, you're a racist." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I'm racist." Okay, you know, like, come on, like this is like we're childish at this point. But you know, I think that moving forward is like eventually there's going to be enough just crazy crap out there that people are just going to be like, "Look, whether you like Trump or you don't, you're like, we got to change the trajectory of where this is going." And I think that, in my opinion, that's the only suitable choice to, if you don't like how things have been going, that'll be the first move to changing it up and, or, you know, at least in your general surroundings, or if you care about the country, where the country's leading.
Yeah. Dude, I remember my dad always telling me when I was younger, when you vote, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? It's simple, right? And I've thrown it out there a few times, and people you'd be surprised at responses. Well, this and this is racist. That's not what I asked. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? You can't tell me the way in the state our country is in right now, that our country as a whole is better off. I mean, dude, I have a Chevy Express van that I drive. I throw my surfboards in there, 30-gallon tank. It costs me almost $200 to fill that thing up. $200. My wife drives a Ford Expedition, 30-gallon tank. Same thing, dude. It's wild. Groceries are going up. You're seeing people struggling. And it's like, yo, we're crushing the middle and lower classes here. Like, what is anybody gonna come in here and fight for us? Like, save the day. What is going on here? Because it feels like it's going to eventually be, you're going to have the haves and the have-nots. There's going to be no middle class. It's going to be wiped out. It's like, what is going on here? That's why I always say I'm looking from this view, like, something's not adding up here, man. Like, how can you go out here and blatantly lie and say Bidenomics is the best thing that's ever happened to this country?
Well, I would like someone to just explain what Bidenomics is. Because no, you can't. There's nothing that explains it. Just it was a rhetorical statement, but you hear that term Bidenomics. It's like, dude, it's like separation of power. Basically, you're like push the haves and have-nots in a further separate direction, wipe out the middle class because there's going to be a few that stick to the top and the rest are going to fall to the bottom. But I think that's like an agenda thing, though. That's what I think that we're getting pushed in that way on purpose, because we want an expansion of government, more government control, and all that kind of stuff, which I don't want to get into conspiracy stuff, but like that's what I truly believe is happening, and we're kind of seeing it play out. But maybe going back to what you said earlier about, at the end of the day, a lot of times it is like good versus evil. And, we kind of see that in many facets, and I think government control has been one of them. And it doesn't mean that all of it's bad. It just means there's a lot of parts of it that need to be changed, in my opinion.
Totally. And I posted about this when it happened, but there was a really big Supreme Court ruling that trended for a few days. I wish people would dig into it a little bit more, but it was the Chevron doctrine, the Chevron deference that got overturned. That is a really big thing. So essentially what that said is the Chevron doctrine was in place for like 40, 50 years. And essentially what it said is if Congress passed a law that was vague, ambiguous, which most laws are, right? If there was a three-letter agency that had jurisdiction over that, they were able to interpret and enforce the law. So now that the Chevron deference has been overturned, what that means is that the power goes back to Congress, and it doesn't. It's not held in the EPA, TSA, IRS, all this kind of stuff, and so nothing has really happened with it yet. But that government control that you're talking about just went back to Congress, which is a good thing because now those people, well, supposedly they're supposed to be our representatives, and we have election coming up, so we can actually vote in the people that we want to be in there to interpret and enforce, the laws. So, like the reason why this even got brought up is because there was there was fishing boats in, I think it was either Alaska or California, but they were having to pay $1,000 to have someone from the EPA on their boat every day to make sure that they were up to par. And they were like, we can't really afford to do this. That's a ridiculous ask. Why is this a thing? Why do you have the authority to do this? And then they just brought it up to the Supreme Court. And so now a lot of these organizations, these 3-letter orgs, don't have the power that they used to have, which is honestly unbelievable.
That's interesting. I honestly didn't realize. I didn't know that it went back to Congress. I mean, I remember like kind of hearing about that, reading and seeing some clips on that, but I didn't know that. I did not know that.
How long ago was this ruling?
That's like a month ago. So
okay.
it was the same day that Trump got off on one of his cases. So that's probably why it got pushed down to the bottom. Plus, the left is screaming about it, saying, "Oh, like now the environment's in trouble," and it's like, no, not really.
Yeah, dude.
Do you guys want to hear something?
Gentry, are you using your you're using a computer, right, Gentry? I'm gonna try something. Can you turn the volume down? That might be what that feedback is, just a little bit.
Yeah. Let me put in my AirPods here.
See if that works. Yeah, because
and get.
Sorry about that, man.
Oh, it's good. I'll let you be the audio engineer.
Yeah, that's all good. Yeah, because like we're talking, I'm like, dude, where is this feedback coming from? I'm looking at all my settings. I'm like, what in the world? No, dude, that's why we like bringing people on here, Gentry, such as yourself, because to me, it is the everyday person that can make such a huge difference. And that's why I like celebrating everyday people, right? We don't need to look, you can look to sports figures or politicians. I hope you don't look for politicians as your heroes, but your everyday person's going through stuff, and they've been through a lot of difficult times. And you're seeing people suffer now, and you can hear great stories of triumph and change. And even, I hope you had a podcast, right?
I have a little media company called Breakaway USA. I haven't done a lot with it recently. I'm letting the guys kind of run it, but I think they're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, no, because I think you were interviewing people, right?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, because I remember I listened to one that was pretty cool. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it might have been one of the last episodes you did, but it was somebody who used to be either trans or in the gay community.
Yeah. So that was Enrique. He's a friend from San Diego. He goes to Awaken Church, and he was like one of the most well-known, successful drag queens in the San Diego area. And he grew up Christian, he grew up Catholic, and just went away from his faith like in a huge way, and was accepted by the drag queen community, the gay community, and his life like was super empty and just a mess, really. Drugs, alcohol, a whole bunch of random weird sex. And so he felt this call to God to go back to church, and he stumbled into a church called Awaken Church down in San Diego. And instead of like pushing him away, they were like, no, come in. Like we got you. And then he kept coming and he kept coming, and he like obviously they had some guards up because you're going to use the right bathroom, you're not going to be around kids, all this kind of stuff, which makes sense because you're not going to put the congregation's people in danger, but they still wanted to love on him, and now he's like a leader in the church, and he's totally forsaken that whole lifestyle. And they put on plays and stuff like that. They're really into the arts, and so he's like the lead role on all this kind of stuff. He has he's got a clothing company now, and like he's doing really well. And it was I love stories like that, because like a lot of the times Christians will look at the people who are living that lifestyle and just think, oh, they're too far gone. But there's really no one that's too far gone for God. We can't necessarily, like, I feel like in a lot of ways you can't necessarily convince somebody to do something, because if you can convince them into it, then that means they can be convinced out of it, right? It's got to be like a heart posture and something that they're like, their heart's changed on, or they're really passionate about. So I love doing that podcast. That was last year. I stopped doing it. I actually had an ex-girlfriend that told me to stop doing it because I was interviewing too many women. So sorry.
Well, hey,
No,
look,
it's all
now
good.
she's an ex. You can
No,
reevaluate
I
that.
just bring it up because that, like, I remember listening to that and it impacted me. It was encouraging, right? Not that I struggled with things that he did, but it just shows you that the Lord can touch anyone. He can change anybody. And I believe that the more influence we have, which is kind of like we're talking about, at least on this episode, a lot of standing for what you believe, standing up for what's right and what you know is right, and your faith and your morals, that has an impact on people. Because the reality is, the more and more people that I talk to and we bring on the podcast, and I see it even when working on duty as a firefighter, everyone's searching. Everyone's lost. Why are we on this piece of dirt floating through space and time? What am I here for? What is bro, we did a first responders night at Hope, and I spoke and gave my testimony and all this stuff. And it's almost like I've told it so many times, but I tried everything. Like, I did. I really went for it. I had a great time. I have minor success in a way, so I can have the funds to go do what I want to do. I've owned my homes and other things and cars I've always wanted and traveling. And at the end of the day, I'm like, this is it? Is this what everyone is talking about? I mean, dude, and I'll tell you what, the whole thing of like sleeping around, that just causes more drama. It's just more problems for you. I'll just bring that straight to the forefront. And it hurts people, and having that true relationship with the Lord and making it, like I said, a relationship, and it's between you and him. I mean, it's what changed me, and it can change the hardest of hearts. It changed Enrique. To me, I'm seeing a lot more things on social media and posts. It seems like a lot more people are starting to turn towards the Lord right now, which is great, because there is not just in our country, but it seems like the whole world's a little bit out of control, especially, again, after we watched the opening ceremony for the Olympics. I mean, again, I was shocked, dude. I was like, I can't believe this is being shown right now. This is crazy. But, to have that relationship with the Lord and to see that in people like you and my other friends and Jordan, and seeing people grow and be bold, it encourages me. It makes me want to be like, hey, you know what? I need to start standing up and doing my thing. And what I want to say to people is, like, stand for what you believe. If there's people that are standing for the Paris Olympics and saying, they can do what they want and show all that, it's like, well, we need to stand for what we believe. We need to show them we can stand firm in our faith. And yes, we can not agree with you. We still called to love you, but we're going to tell you, like, that ain't right. And it's hard when you're held accountable. Nobody wants to be told that they're wrong.
Well, I tell you what, if the satirical setup was towards like a Muslim religion, that would not have gone over very well.
No.
And that's kind of like the double-edged sword of the Christian viewpoint, right? Is like, you're supposed to turn the other cheek or be accepting. There's also I think, like, you also need to stand up for what you believe too. I know we talked a little bit about that, so I don't want to drone on too much, but I think, like, what you're saying, Tim, is like there's a lot of change in that way that I think is being publicized in a good way. As far as, and I'm not saying that, I don't want to, like, tell people how to or what to believe in, but I think that having a base in, like, a Christian, or moral fundamental approach in religion is a good start, and not being afraid to talk about that. And I think that, people post, and, like, it's so random that you said that, because I've noticed, like, in the past, like, week, there's more things like scrolling through like my reels and stuff of like just prayers and just like reaching out to people. It's just like a lot of good stuff, and I think seeing that, it kind of like energizes you, and it makes you like feel like, hey, like there are a lot of people out there that think the same way or maybe close to, and maybe you bringing something up is the little nudge they need to change their life. I mean, like, thanks for sharing that story about as you said, drag queen, right? Was down in San Diego and now went to a church, and hopefully that they're doing awesome and the church is very receptive, and you know just like hearing things like that, I think is very optimistic, and there needs to be a lot more stuff like that, and I think now more than ever, because like I feel like
Mm-hmm.
you turn the television on, it's like everything's doom and gloom, everything,
Yeah.
and it's like which I jump on that watching it all the time. So I'm not going to say that I'm like against it because it's as far as entertainment value. But at the end of the day, that entertainment value, or what I perceive is that sometimes, like you're saying earlier, like, just the rhetoric of saying negative things about one thing and scare tactics and, oh, it's the next Hitler and blah, 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 blah. This can perpetuate more situations like what we experienced a couple weeks ago. I have a little bit different thought process on the shooting situation, but it doesn't take away the fact that it riles people up in the wrong way, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
like that big reset, whether it's finding religion or faith or whatever your personal relationship is with God, that can be the reset that can perpetuate the actual change that would benefit really everybody,
Mm-hmm.
so I guess we're at one day at a time, but in the moment, there's
So,
hope.
Jordan, something interesting you said is that, like, there's this idea in with what Jesus said with turning the other cheek, and I've actually looked into this a little bit, and turning the other cheek actually means command respect from the person who hit you. So back in the Roman times, what they would do is they would hit you backhanded, and that was a sign of disrespect, that you were below them, all this kind of stuff, because the Romans were kind of the on the higher end of the hierarchy because they had conquered the Jews. But if you turned the other cheek, you had to hit them with your forehand, right? So it's not necessarily like, oh, we're supposed to just lay down and take it. It's like, no, we're actually supposed to command respect from that. So there's so much of Jesus's words that get just like minced and misused today. And we're supposed to be loving like Jesus and all this kind of stuff, but Jesus really loved the people that were like yearning for him, right? He was super kind to everyone that would go follow him around and hear him preach, but he was very strict and harsh with the people who didn't receive his message, right? He called them brood of vipers. He called them whitewashed tombs. He told the disciples to dust the feet off of the town that they left as they didn't accept Jesus. He flipped tables in the temple. Like, people are missing that side of Jesus. And I think it's probably one of the biggest misses that we, like, as Christians, that we see. We're not supposed to be weak. We're not supposed to like turn the other cheek, like, oh, hit me again, right? It's more of like a try that again, right? Because we're all the same in the eyes of God, right? I'm not saying to go start a fight, but I'm saying, like, know your place, right? Know your place. There's also another thing in Romans, right? Romans, I think it's Romans 6 or Romans 1, where it talks about how we're supposed to submit to the authority. And it taken at face value, that makes sense. Like, we're just supposed to like follow all the laws and do all this stuff and not put up a fight because God put them there. But I think people are missing what kind of country that we live in, because back in the Roman times, they were subjects. They had to follow the laws. Like, and if they didn't, they'd go to jail. And so, like, the way that their structure was set up, that's just how it was. We're citizens in this country. That means co-ruler. And these politicians that we vote in, they're not our rulers. They're our public servants. And so we are the rulers of the United States. in a lot of ways. We elect a representative into government so that, you know, we can have someone that is going to be our voice, but we don't elect rulers. That's so I like to anybody listening, please go understand the difference between a subject, which is what they were in the Bible, and a citizen, which is what we are today.
That's a really good point. And
Fuck.
yeah, and I'm glad you said that about the turn the other cheek, because I feel like I've used that a couple times over the years in reference to making it more sounding submissive versus, you know, what's your explanation of what that means, which is great, because, like, you know, I don't know, I don't like, anyway, I don't want to get into that, but it's
Let's get into it, dude.
Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is that, like, you know, like, I don't know, like, I don't like feeling like I get, you know, you get pushed around, like, in certain ways where it's like, oh, you can't talk about this, or, oh, because of this, you know, and it's just like, you know, screw off. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I feel like, and if I'm passionate about it, like, you know, again, like, I'm not going to beat my sense into you, but I definitely am not going to back down off of how I feel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like that misconstruing, like, being a, you know, I don't want to say being like a good Christian or a practicing Christian, you know, I just mean, like, I mean, yeah, tolerance is something. It's an actual thing. And just depending on where you're, you know, breaking that down of how it's being relayed is very important because of the context of how you're saying it. But I feel like that term does get used more as like, oh, turn the other cheek, to being like, you know, allowing people to keep you down or, you know, smack you into place. I think that was a very good way to put that, and I can't wait to say that to somebody else when I hear that term again. I'm like, well, did you know? You know,
Well, did you know?
Yeah, my
yeah,
buddy
I
Gentry.
feel like my life is like Snapple cap information stuff now.
Dude.
Like, fun fact.
So the other thing too, like, the Bible is it's a really controversial book, but how the Bible, like, teaches us, like, what to do and even how it was written. Like, Jesus told us, or not Jesus told us, Jesus told his disciples to go into different cities and preach. And so we're not just supposed to, like, stay at home on the couch and, like, do a Bible study. We're supposed to, like, get out there and preach the word, right? First to what is it? Frick, I forget it. I forget what it was. But essentially, you're supposed to, like, go, like, small to your family, then your community, then the city, and then the nation, right? To go into all the world and preach the gospel, right? But, like, he's telling people to go, and he's telling people to get out there into uncomfortable situations. He's not telling people to, like, just hang out and hope people come to your church, right? I feel like the church for a lot of people, it's being used in the wrong way. They're trying to go there to get fed. I think it's probably good until, like, month 8, 9, or 10 of being a new Christian, and then you have the Bible and you are a sovereign human, so you can read it, and you're not in Iran or China, so you're not going to get thrown in jail for that. But I feel like the perspective shift that I want everyone to have is that the church is like a really easy on-ramp to get people saved. You don't have to know everything, but you can invite someone to church because there is someone who knows more than you, and it's your pastor. Hopefully he knows more than you. He's not 100%, right? I disagree with my pastor on several things, but because he's a human being, he's not going to get it 100% right. But the local church is one of the greatest ways for someone who maybe doesn't know all the right answers to just invite someone into the community and be like a conduit or a connector. And just, I mean, so here's what I did and why I'm so passionate about this. There was a church that I didn't help start it, but I was there at the beginning and I helped it grow a lot. We started during COVID, which was in Seattle, which was crazy. I think Seattle had, like, one of the longest periods of COVID. It was, like, all the way out until, like, 2022, until all the restrictions were off, which is insane. But we started a church in COVID, and I was there like 12 people in a living room. And then my pastors actually encouraged me to start posting more about political stuff after I went viral, which was amazing because so much really good stuff has come of it.
Yeah.
But I kept inviting people to church online and offline. Like wherever I went, I was inviting people to church. And this is like about the same time that I had come back to the faith from kind of like what you were describing, where I was just like out in left field, doing my own thing, partying, drugs, women, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And so like, I wasn't necessarily like, I didn't have a long, didn't have a really good track record of walking with Jesus, but I knew that my pastors did. And so I was so impacted by the church, and my life had been changed tremendously because of like the teaching there and getting close to Jesus and the presence of God, that I just started inviting people there. And this is like a humble brag, but there are hundreds and probably thousands of people that I got to go through the doors of my church, just my church. And I was encouraging people to go to church like nationwide. And so the number could be in the thousands, but there's also dozens and dozens of stories of people whose lives were changed because I invited them to church.
Let's go, baby.
And that's a humble brag, right? That obviously I'm like, but you can do that too.
Right.
Anyone listening can do that too. I'm not special.
No.
My mom
no, and
me,
I think,
but
I was like, don't tell your mom, dude. No, but and I think that's what it is. It's being able, it's communicating, it's expressing, and being able to, whether it's, you're talking about politics, religion, whatever, like it doesn't take, like, you don't have to be whatever that person thinks is that special thing to be able to impact others around you, and I think that's, kind of, I know we get to experience that, whether it's, from doing the podcast and having, or just our jobs in general in life. And it sounds like yourself, it's like, look, whatever experiences up until, tying in with that church, especially at that time during COVID with the restrictions and everything, is probably very chaotic. But to have that as the aftermath of being like able to sit back and take the humble brag, of course, like, because, and I don't mean that negatively at all. I just mean, like, it's an awesome thing to be able to, at least put your name on something where it's like, hey, what I did and how I influenced things helped people either bring happiness or happiness to the people around them. It's like, it's a ripple effect, and, having those opportunities, if more people sought out to do that, not realizing that it doesn't have to be something crazy. It doesn't. It could be a little thing, and then that sets the trajectory for a lot of good things to come. So I think that's awesome. And, I need to start practicing what I preach more, but I definitely, there's something to that.
Well, so it could be as easy as like saying, like, what are your plans for the weekend? Oh, well, Saturday I'm going surfing or fishing or whatever. And then Sunday going to church, going to brunch afterwards with some people, blah, blah. It could be as easy as that, right? I've invited several people to church just from that, because they're like, oh, church? Like, what church do you go to? Oh, I went to Hope Village. You should come.
Dude, I love it, man. I mean, you never know. Gosh, just planting that seed. Plant the seed, get people there, let the Lord do the rest. I mean, it's huge. I know what changed me is people that were praying for me. My parents. This is so terrible, Gentry, but I remember my mom was like, Tim, I pray that you don't go to hell every day. It's like, geez, Mom. I'm like, what do you think of me? I'm like, geez, man.
Prayer.
Here, I'll tell you this. My mom sent me the movie Flight with Denzel Washington, right?
Great movie.
And it was a great movie, but he was just like self-destructive.
Yeah.
And she was like, this movie reminds me of you.
They're like, well, did I land the plane or what?
Yeah. Don't you love how just brutally honest moms are, because they love you, dude? But
they're great.
I mean, it just goes along with like inviting people, having people that are praying for you. It's so important. It's so important to pray for others. And, I'm with you on that, man. I've invited quite a few people to go to different Bible studies and church. And even just from this podcast, it's interesting when I started talking about my faith, It's been about like 2 years now. And before I was on here talking. I was like, I don't go to church. I don't need any of that, blah, blah. But what I tell people is you can hear a man who's searching and struggling. He's trying to find his way. He's trying to figure out why he's here, And then I started talking about my faith on here. The more I opened up about it, I was shocked by some people that were messaging me, friends and other ones that would hit me up on either, social media or send me a text. And I was like, I had no idea like you were struggling with this or that you were even a believer at one point, kind of like I was, or you're interested. It's so crazy when you just start talking and just tell them like, hey, this is what the Lord did for me. This is where I've been, come with me, come over here, come check out this church. And I was actually surprised how open people were, even to the point where now on our Instagram on Sundays, I post a verse up. I just put it up on the story. And I will tell you those verses, that is the most traction or views and stuff we get. Like the last one I did last Sunday had 35,000 views. And I think like 10,000 shares or something. It was just a simple verse and a picture. It was crazy. Yeah, I was just like, wait, what?
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's happened a couple times now. That one had the most traction. I can't remember which one it was, but I get the daily verse off the Bible app, stuff like that. And I have a friend who unfortunately just got diagnosed with some cancer, so I'm sending him stuff and everything. I'm like, I'm just gonna post this one up. But to me, it just shows you, like, man, everyone's hurting and going through something, dude. I mean, that's why it's just everyone's trying to figure out their way, man. We're trying to figure out why. What is this? The purpose, and realizing that my purpose is being that relationship with the Lord. It's brought so much peace, so much hope. It's almost like that struggle's kind of gone as far as like being lost, trying to fulfill that desire, that, as they say, that God-shaped hole that's in your heart that's only filled by Jesus, but you fill it with other things that are not Him, that you're not supposed to be doing, but you go for it anyways. And it's one thing my dad always told me: your flesh will never be fulfilled. You're always going to want more. It's never going to be fulfilled. And another thing that he told me is like, your reason. I'm trying to remember. I'm just paraphrasing here, but it was along the lines of, you can't trust your flesh because your flesh is always going to let you down, but your flesh isn't even going with you when you die. And I was like, dang, dude. I was like, my man knows what's up. My man knows. Now, the last thing I want to ask you real quick, Gentry, is like, what do you think it's your faith now that drives you? What's your motivation behind like putting these things up in your life, how your life has kind of turned into what it is after, that video went viral? What is like kind of motivating you to keep going, because we have social media. I have it, dude. There's one account I had. I'm not going to talk about it because I signed India, but we sold it. We did well. But dude, social media is work. It's a lot. It's a lot to stay up with things, and you're on it. Like when something happens that's in the news, that's pretty major, or something behind the scenes, when I open up any of my apps, the first thing I see is you. I'm like, dude, my guy is on it.
Thanks, man. I honestly, it's a really selfish reason. I want to have a lot of grandkids, and I want to have a ranch. I want to get married, have kids, have grandkids, like the whole 9 yards. And I want to have a ranch in Wyoming or Tennessee or somewhere, maybe Montana. And I want to live the American dream.
I love it.
And I've gotten probably closer to 200 million views on the content that I've posted over the last 4 years. And I get messages all the time that, like you've woken me up, you've got me back to church, you've done this, done that. And I'm just really passionate about saving America, because not necessarily that we're the most moral country, but we're the ones that is holding everything together. And the radical left, and people throw that phrase around all the time, and it's almost like a nonsensical thing. It's one of those words that like doesn't have any meaning. But like when I say radical left, at least I mean like socialist, Marxist, people who hate you and are trying to like take away everything that America is, right? The American dream. And they've done a decent job with that the last 4 years. And if Kamala gets in, she's going to do a really good job of taking away what like our livelihoods and just the opportunity to, you know, have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or if you read John Locke, The Pursuit of Property, like it's going to be so hard to own property. It's
100%.
going to be so incredibly hard. And so that's why I'm fighting so hard for Trump. Not necessarily that he's like the most moral person. I'm a huge fan of him. I could debate anybody on anything that any like lie that that they're saying about him. But in my view, and Charlie Kirk actually had a really good post about this, but in my view, it's more of a chess move than anything, right? If we get Trump in, it's going to help. It's going to help me. It's going to help a lot of people live the American dream again.
Right.
So that's why I'm fighting so hard for it, because, I mean, Trump's not perfect. It's pretty obvious, but he's absolutely hands down 100% the best choice for America. If you like to keep more of your money, if you want to have safe cities, if you want to have a border, if you don't want to keep funding endless wars, like they're talking about raising taxes for Kamala, and we're sending billions of dollars overseas. And I'm like, hang on. First of all, why are we paying taxes? Because you can just print it. That goes into like monetary theory, which we don't have time to get into. But we're also getting taxed out the wazoo. Income tax probably isn't even legal at this point, or they're making it legal because of endless wars, right? If you go back to like 1913 and the Jekyll Island thing, and like the advent of income tax, even during the Civil War, it's just absolutely insane. So like that's why I'm so passionate about Trump. It's not just like I'm in the cult, right? I do think that there are probably some people who really don't know what they're doing. They're just going along with the hype, which is fine, right? I've always said that there's like 90% of people are sheep, and then 5% of people are actually awake, and then the other 5% are controlling everyone else. So like but like I can articulate very well why I'm fighting so hard and supporting Trump and the next guy after Trump, and the next best candidate after Trump, because I want to have a ranch and I want to have a lot of grandkids.
I love it. I love it, dude.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean,
I think
it is the American dream, man. To be real, I don't see myself retiring in California. That is something that I would love to have one day, is a lot more property openness and land. So I feel exactly what you're saying, especially with my wife being pregnant with our first child now. Like Jordan has 3 kids, and it changes you, man. It changes your thought process. It changes, how you want to live, where you want to live, what's the future for my daughter. And, I've talked with Jordan and some other people, like, how in the world is my daughter going to be able to afford a home in Southern California? It's almost impossible now. Like, I live in a decent middle class neighborhood, but everything is well over 1.2 million. That's not what this neighborhood was built for. It's not supposed to be that way. It's crazy.
On your current firefighter's income, can you afford the house you live in right now?
Ooh.
how long do you have to
I
save
would
up?
say probably not. A lot of our firefighters, they can't even live in the county that we work in.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah.
driving 2-3 hours to work. We have many that live out of state that fly in.
Yeah. I mean, for our state, a firefighter job is full time is a lot higher than most other states. So, but the income is skewed because everything around it costs just as much. So it's like if you looked up to see how much like average firefighter in the state of California makes, if you're coming from another state, you'd be like, oh my gosh, they're crushing it out there. But the average cost in the county that we live in for a house is $1.2 million. You know what I mean? So that's just the purchase of the home. So I can assure you that a standard firefighter wage is not enough to live, at least in the respective county that we work in. The only times where you hear guys or women that have bought in the last, is normally they either have a dual income where their significant other is doing very well, or they bought 10 plus years ago, or like even in myself, like I purchased a home in 2008 after the economy just, nosedove. And it's like, it's more, which I was fortunate to be in that situation, because at that point I had nothing and I scraped into getting into a house. And, so looking at people now, especially when we work with like, newer hires or younger folks in the fire industry, like, a lot of times I ask you, like, oh, how'd you get that? How do you have all this? How have you done it? And you're like, well, I've been doing this for like just shy of 20 years, and I've done a lot of things to put myself in the best case scenario. And I mean, don't get me wrong, dude, I had fun. I did a lot of silly stuff and all that, but I also was focused on like having a goal. And now I look at these kids coming in and I'm like, I don't know how you're going to do it. Like, can you rent out a basement, your parents' house, and not pay anything for 10 years? Then you might have enough to put a down payment on a place that you'll be broke on anyway, because you have to rent every room out to try to sustain it. And again, I'm not a housing expert. I do have a little bit of knowledge in real estate, but everything's inflated. The oh my gosh, I'm blanking. What's the word I'm trying to say is high. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is everything's inflated across the board. Loan. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I can't think. But I don't know what the fix is to that, other than trying to reshape like economic value as a whole. If we can not outsource everything, we can do things inside our country. We could limit some regulations that hopefully can drive. Everyone's always worried about capitalistic marketplace, and it's like, the goal isn't to have one person be the most expensive and the most powerful. The goal is to be able to generate many people that can do that, which drives actually down costs, or maybe even, the quality of whatever you're trying to purchase. So it's like we limit that and we get confused with why we're in the situation that we're in. And there's a lot of other influences just in capitalism, but anyway, I don't know how people are going to do it, and
I don't know. But I'll tell you what, Gentry, if you get a lot of acreage, I'll take two. I'll buy you sell to me, dude. I'm in.
So can we build like a compound in Wyoming or something?
Dude, I'd be down as long as I get a little pond and I put some bass in there. I'm golden.
Dude,
I'm golden.
I love it. Well, Gentry, we went way over time, but I feel like, dude, we want to have you back on again because there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but it's like we're out of that time. But thank you for just coming on here and being open and honest and chatting with us. It means a lot, dude. We've been trying to get you on here for quite some time, and I really appreciate it, man. I really do. And if you don't mind, I would actually like to pray for you if you're cool with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it, man. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we've had with Gentry. Lord, he's sharp, he's smart. Continue to keep him sharp and smart, and encourage him and keep him motivated to keep posting and doing the things he's doing on social media and his other endeavors, Lord. Father, we pray for our country, that you continue to guide us and lead us and get us to a place where we're back to where things can kind of be normal, Lord. We thank you for what you've done. We thank you for Gentry and this time that you've given us, Lord. Bless him and his future with his family, property, whatever he's going for, Lord, and just guide him. Thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Gentry,
Thanks,
you
guys.
are one heck of a dude, my friend. I hope you had a good time on here, man. We really appreciate it, dude.
Thank you. I'm gonna send that clip to my mom.
Oh yeah. Hey, well, I'll send mine. Awesome. You send yours to your mom, dude. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much, Gentry.
See you guys.
All right.